actually can understand a lot about the current behavior of those consumers. Right, so it's the data team that they have tries to get from all the data points that are collected. So they have a CRM database with 1,300 data points per user in total. Not everybody, of course, has the same level of granularity and detail, but with all those users, they collect a huge amount of data and try to understand what those consumers are doing at this moment. At the same time, these consumers it could be, for instance, Adam in this case, and Adam can consume a series of products from Vodafone, might have some issues with Wi-Fi, and potentially also is really an active fan of sports events and actively works on those, uses all these Vodafone systems to consume Vodafone's products and services. Now, this kind of data is available for all the users in Vodafone's database, and the data is getting richer and richer on a daily basis. We know these consumers already quite well, and it's good that we know them already quite well, so that we can start to help understand what their future behavior might be. So here's where the data scientists from Vodafone have started the work a couple of years ago to start to predict the behavior of consumers, and of course that's relevant to certain business outcomes. For instance, if a consumer might actually want to leave Vodafone. So the data science team works a lot on that, and it creates models based on all these data points and tries to predict the future of the data that of the behavior of that consumer. The level of extent to which we can predict that behavior varies a little bit. So let's talk about Adam. We might be able to say, based on the amount of Wi-Fi issues Adam has had and the drop in usage of particular products, that Adam is, and the amount of contacts that he's had with the Vodafone customer service center, that Adam is not super happy with Vodafone. And we might be able to predict to a certain level of validity that Adam is on his way out. And we cannot do that only for Adam. We can also do this for many other people inside Vodafone's database, because we've plotted this prediction model on many other users. However, based on that model, we could say maybe that they want to leave. We're still lacking a particular amount of information, right? If we would have more of that information, we could potentially create better marketing interventions to see if the marketing team that we also deploy at Vodafone could change particular outcomes of that behavior with Vodafone's users. So we want to use all the data we can to make a more personalized approach to all the users that sit in Vodafone's database. And the data science team, together with the data analytics team, works strongly together with Vodafone's marketing team to change the potential outcome of the behavior that's predicted by the prediction model. So to be able to do that, we actually started to work more intensively with Vodafone, because we believe that we can further personalize the relationship and the communication with Vodafone's consumers, based on a deeper understanding of what makes those consumers behave in the way that they do.
Yeah, so that's in the end our goal, that we can send them really interventions that matter to everyone on a personal level, so that less people will leave. But yeah, how did we do that? How did we get to this point? Well, we all know that marketing is the one that is actually in direct contact with the customers. So marketing has to come up with actions and interventions, but they of course don't have to do that on their own. They have data and insights team to fuel their thinking. And we all, like Dan already said, Vodafone has a data analytics team that looks at current behavior and a data science team that looks at, or that helps to predict the future. But we now want to add a human layer by doing research and applying behavioral science principles to build interventions that truly can connect with people on a personal level. But of course, if we offer all these things as separate pieces of the puzzle, the marketing team still doesn't know what to do. So what we need to do is break down the silos so that marketing can actually send the right interventions to the right people. Okay, but how did we do this? So what we did was, well, our goal is to influence behavior. We want that Adam, who is predicted to leave, we actually want to change his behavior and want to make sure that he stays. Now, how can we do that? Well, we need to build interventions that actually make impact on Adam and that are relevant to Adam on a personal level. Well, to do that, we need to apply, or we apply, behavioral science. Now, what is behavioral science? Behavioral science is a theory to understand how people behave and why people behave. Because we all know people don't always behave rationally. So behavioral science actually is the observed effect in human behavior to help us understand why people do not always act as rational as we would want them to act. And behavioral science actually focuses on a number of behavioral science principles to help us understand the behavior and why people are behaving the way they do. And we used about 16 of them to help us understand how we can influence the churn at the Vodafone Ziggo. I won't go into detail of all of them because that will take a long time, but I'll explain a few of these principles. For example, we have present bias, which is about the preference to having a short-term reward over a long-term reward. So it's basically the dynamic that if you offer something that people immediately get a benefit from, that will probably outweigh even if there's a longer-term benefit, which is bigger. Then we have the principle of IKEA effect. And that's basically the idea that if you create something yourself, so in the case of Vodafone Ziggo, if you can build your own bundle, similar to when you build your own cupboard from IKEA, it gives you a feeling of satisfaction. It makes you feel empowered and it makes you value what you've created. Then we have satisficing. This is actually the notion of that good is good enough. Like we all know someone who still has an old school phone because a phone just needs to call. That's all it needs to do. So it's the idea that you don't want to pay for something you don't actually use or that you don't need. And then the last one I'll explain is choice overload. This is the idea that people will buy more if there's less choice. That's basically, if there's too much choice, people get into a decision paralysis and won't make any decision. Now, these are some of the principles that we've used to build interventions that can actually make an impact. But in the end, we of course want to make sure that the right interventions go to the right people. So in order to do that, we need to understand how the mind works. We need to figure out who's sensitive to what kind of behavioral science principle. Okay, so what we in the end did together with Vodafone Ziggo were a number of steps. And the first step was that we focused on how can we use behavioral science principles to build interventions.
Yeah, so it was very interesting actually to see the collaboration across all these different skill sets in a very large team, right? So we believe that by offering the insights on what makes consumers tick, we could actually help make the marketing people provide better interventions so that they could engage better with the clients. And I see a question coming in, is this actually allowed under GDPR? I forgot to mention earlier on in the presentation that everything that we do on sharing this data sits with the right level of consent, of course, from all the users. And if we don't have the consent, we only use data at an aggregated level, right? So there's never any PII kind of data involved. But of course, it's very important as an organization, when you do the data management, that you also get this consent from all your users. But what we did is on top of all the data that we had sitting, so the behavioral data that we had sitting in the systems, we tried to add an understanding, okay, what is the behavioral component that people might engage better on, given what we know of them. So that's a step that we tried to take. And based on the analysis that we did and the creativity sessions that we had with the marketing team and also the data scientists, we created roughly 30 different ideas about how to leverage the insights on behavioral science in better interventions with those users. So we came up with, for instance, an opportunity to create proactively a downgrade option for a consumer, or to say, okay, well, some consumers are probably better off with a yearly service checkup because it works better for them. Or maybe people would get a personally relevant gift for being loyal to Vodafone already for such a long time. Or maybe if they would be the first ones to get access to a particular innovation, a technological innovation, that could work better for them. So instead of what we would see Vodafone would normally do for their clients, which is to give them a sort of price-based retention offer, they were considering now, as a result of the human insights that we were adding on the table, to create more meaningful offers and interventions for their consumers. But then, of course, we need to know what level, so what kind of intervention is more relevant to people than to other people. And this is where we introduced another way to understand the human part.
Yes. So we need to understand how the mind works. And when we were looking at all the behavioral science principles, we noticed a lot of principles, you could build attitudes around it. You could see, for example, that people might be more sensitive to present bias if they focus more on the short-term versus long-term advantages. So those are attitudes that you can put into a statement. We can also figure out people, are they very price sensitive, or are they more a leader or a follower? So we build all kinds of attitudinal statements around the behavioral science principle. But then we noticed we miss something. We still also need to look at more motivational needs to understand, for example, if people are looking, if they have a need for more security and advice and guidance, or are they people that want to show that they know technology and understanding that they have a certain skill that they want to share with the world. So we build a framework taking all these elements into account. And then we, of course, had to put it to the test, and we had to do, or we did research. And how we did research was by zooming in on a part of VodafoneZiggo's customer database. So we sent a questionnaire to a part of their database. And what we found out was very interesting. We figured out that, for example, our Adam, the reason why he wouldn't react to, for example, a price discount or a hard promotion is because he's a tech-savvy person. He really cares about the technology, and he wants to have the latest and the greatest technology, and he wants to show to his friends and family that he's progressive, that he understands the technology. So just a hard discount wouldn't work with Adam. And we found 3 other segments. We found a segment called being valued, which is a very loyal group of people, but they also want to be rewarded for their loyalty. They want to get some advantages and being recognized that they are loyal. And they also look for guidance from experts. So for example, they would be very sensitive to the choice overload. If you give them too many options, they wouldn't be able to make a decision, and they would like to get some guidance and expertise. Then we had a group called Basics. For them, it was really the idea of good is good enough was very important to them. So they don't want to pay for something they don't use. They just, the telecom provider, they just need to provide something that works, and that's it. And then the last group we found were the deal seekers. And for them, they really get energy from finding more advantages, from getting better deals, from getting a new promotion. So those are the 4 groups we found, and we found them on the CRM database. So we could also link it back and look at their actual behavior. And we saw that there was clearly a link with who they are, why they behave, what their attitudes are, and what their behavior is. So we saw, for example, the tech-savvy group, that they are more likely to have the more upgraded packages. And then we had the being valued. For them, we saw that they're slightly older. They still often use their fixed line, and also they focus on upgraded packages, but most likely out of more an insecurity feeling. They just want to get the best package so that they know they don't have to worry about it. Then we have the basics. We saw that they are more likely to use the all-in-one bundle, and the deal seekers, we saw that they use a lot of products quite often. So that's why also for them, having these additional advantages is something they want because they use a lot of services. Now, and then of course, the most exciting part, well, at least for me as a researcher, was, okay, will they actually react differently to all the intervention IDs we came up with? I'm very happy to say that we do see a very clear link between all the ideas we came up with and the different groups of customers we found. So we see, for example, that the tech-savvy group, they find the idea of getting first access to a new innovation much more relevant, but also having a provider that gives them regularly new innovations to prove to them that they are future-proof. The being valued group, they are more interested in loyalty benefits, but also in, for example, yearly service checkups, so that they are sure and feel secure that everything is set up accordingly and it's not gonna break down. While the basics, for them, they really look at, okay, they would like to build their own package. That's a relevant idea for them, but also getting clear user overviews to make sure they're not paying for something they don't want. While the deal seekers, they as well look for more loyalty benefits because they keep looking for more advantages. Well, if they get that with their own provider, they will be already happy and are more likely to stay. Okay, so this is what we've done so far, and now our project is still not over. We're still experimenting together with Vodafone Ziggo. But what we're doing right now is trying to build a prediction model, because we now know from a few people in the database what their human layer is, but we want to know it for everyone. And we, of course, do not want to send a questionnaire to the entire database. No, we want to look at their behavioral data and see if we can predict what their human layer is. And of course, that's not that easy because, you know, humans are not fully rational, so their behavior is not always completely linked. And we also noticed that when we were building the prediction model, we noticed, okay, by purely looking at the back data, we can't fully predict the emotional layer, the human layer. So we took a step in between where we actually enriched the segments with back data so that we can build a prediction model that is stronger and has quite a decent accuracy to predict who belongs to which segment. But in the meantime, to make this model work really well, because we see some overlap between the predicted segments and original segments, we will test interventions to make sure we can really be really sure that we're having the right human layer for every customer.
Yes, and this is what makes it really interesting to work with data science people and consumer insights and market research people, because market research people have a really big tendency to want to be absolutely perfect in predicting what's happening. But because it's a very dynamic situation that we're in with all the consumers in general, but also in Vodafone Ziggo, the idea that we came up with together with Vodafone Ziggo is to test in real life on live data and on live consumers over time what the outcome of the interventions is, and to compare that with people that we do not change the current intervention with. So the idea is, for instance, for the tech-savvy people, to target them with the more innovation on technology kind of proposition, and the being valued people with a better loyalty approach, maybe with a proactive service call of some kind. And to also do this with the basics and the deal seekers, to have a control cell on the one side, and then to have a standard offer and an experimentation offer, so that we can see what the outcome, the change in outcome is. And of course, we do this in a scientific approach, so we will find the right sizes of the cells so that we can do very good and accurate predictions of the outcomes. The reason that we can do that is because Vodafone is structured already in a very agile way. So we can take step-by-step approaches, first maybe focusing on the tech-savvy people, set up the interventions there if it's sort of a low-key intervention change that we want to do. And for the more complex interventions that we want to change, it might take some more time, so we prioritize them to be a little bit later. But in the end, probably by the end of this year, we have a very good level of understanding how much the churn rate was reduced for particular groups, and how much the cost that we have with the churn is also reduced. And of course, that's a very important way for Vodafone to look at it. But imagine if you're a user of Vodafone or consumer, and you actually have a much better experience with Vodafone. So that's the belief that's driving the experimentation that we want to do until probably the end of the year. And then if you summarize the total approach that we took, right, it was a very big collaboration between, first of all the data people that help to describe in a behavioral way what the users of Vodafone are doing at this moment and have been doing in the past years. Then to use a collaboration with the data science people to understand really how they predict what the future outcome of churn might be. Then to work with the marketing communications people to help them understand in a high level of detail what kind of behavioral, motivational drivers there are for a particular group to behave in a particular way. And of course, to add all this data and all this understanding from a human perspective from the market research and the consumer insights people. At Ipsos, we deployed a very new team in a very rare combination where we had consultancy people with an advisory background who worked with the entire group of people, up to 35 people at one individual moment in time, and to manage all the engagement in the right level of workshops and that kind of setting. Also creative sessions where we're ideating in a virtual way with all these different teams at the same time. We worked with what is a relatively new function in a market research organization, a head of data and analytics, who were really supportive on cracking all the code that you need to understand the human behavior, but also came up with the prediction model on plotting the human insights on the entire Vodafone database. So that's also the work that we as a market research agency did in this case. And of course, understanding the behavior of all these people and potential future behavior and the motivation behind it with all the kinds of consumer insights frameworks that we already deploy for decades as a market research organization. So I saw some questions on that. How do we get to understand the tech savviness of people? That's actually using conventional market research methods that have been around for decades already and are really proven technologies, if you would use the common slang today, to bring that all together. And remember, if we are able, together with Vodafone, to change a 0.1% point level of churn, it means a million difference for them and for their clients. So we're really hopeful that we will succeed in our challenge together with Vodafone. And I think that takes us to the end of the presentation, right, Tris?
Yes.
I hope you liked it. I think we have some time for questions. I saw some questions already coming in the chat message. So if you have other questions, please go ahead. I saw, for instance, somebody asking a question: did we use neuromarketing for the influencing of the behavior part? Well, Tris, you can maybe add a little bit on that.
Well, we didn't really use neuromarketing itself, but we focused very much on the behavioral science thinking and did bring, like Diane explained, we brought all the marketeers and the data scientists all together to come up with interventions that can really make a difference. And now we're going to put it to the test to see to what extent it actually has an impact. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, so we did consider, this is actually quite an interesting part, we did consider to maybe test the concepts of the new interventions, but we also realized that in an agile setup, it's not necessarily, you don't need to do that per se anymore, right? Because the canvas is digital, so you can change whatever touch point you want to have quite easily. Of course, there's also not only digital touch points in email or on the web, or maybe even in advertisements. There could also, of course, be contacts in a call center, but it's relatively easy for Vodafone to change these interactions with the consumers. So maybe as a result, you don't need to per se test a creative or a concept like you used to do before with market research. But of course, if you're very willing to pay a slightly higher price and get a much more precise outcome predicted on the creative itself, it may be advisable to do that. I think for especially banks or even more high involvement products and services, you could imagine that it's more relevant. Somebody is asking, how were the data points collected for this? I think we answered that question to the right level of detail already, but just to give you the opportunity to ask another question if you want.
I could explain a bit more how we got to the data points or the tech-savvy person. So what we did was we created a list of attitudinal and motivational statements We applied actually a max diff question. So people got to see a number of statements and had to say which one was most relevant and which one was least relevant, so that we could really pull their profile apart. And then, of course, we applied a number of segmentation algorithms and techniques to find these 4 groups on the database.
Yeah.
Another question: how long did this process take to this point? Well, we've started in, I think, October or November. That's when we actually started building and design the whole setup.
Yeah. So so together with Vodafone, we have a very long relationship already with their head of CMI and also with the data scientists, and we sat down together. And discussed really at length, are we going to try to do this together? Because this has never been done anywhere in the world before to this level, and really driving it through with the experimentation all the way at the end. So it's quite fundamental the way that we approach this, and you only want to do that with a partner that you have a long-lasting relationship already with, so that you can see it through to the end. So we expect that the final data on the change of the churn will become available to us probably already a little bit in Q3, but mostly until the end of the year. But what we already see is by giving the attention to the different silos that usually coexist in an organization in such a holistic way, we see already the belief is increasing to the level of the board of Vodafone that this is actually going to make a really impressive impact on those churn rates. And therefore also on consumer experience. So I think that we already proved it because these are seasoned, business experienced people that are already convinced that this is going to trigger a good amount of response with their users.
Yeah. Now, looking at the percentage of new data versus old data, I would say we have a lot of current behavioral data. So Vodafone has a lot of data, and that I think would be referred to as old data. So actually, if you look at the size of the old data, the level of new data is very limited, in my opinion. We only asked, I think, in total 10 questions to the customers. So it was a very short questionnaire. And yeah, so the level of new data is very small, but can have a very big impact because we really try to understand the emotions and the human layer.
Yeah, and I think also to add to that, we are, of course, as researchers, quite familiar with the level of questions that you can ask to probe people and the extent to which you don't want to be intrusive anymore in their experience. So we were quite happy that we had a good level of response on the data set and actually already found these people available to provide their opinion on some of the questions that we asked. So therefore, it's very important that you can select these 10 questions with the experience that you have as an insights company. And also it was quite interesting the questions that we asked were asked in a platform that is operated by Vodafone itself, right? So it's not that we had an external engagement with them, no. People were probed through, I think it was Qualtrics in this case, which is a platform to probe consumer opinions. But then again, Vodafone needed to have access to the intellectual property of Ipsos to be able to ask the right questions at the right time. I see another one, which is Edwards asking, what type of model did you use to predict the behavior of all Vodafone customers? Well, it was a super model, of course. But maybe, Tris, I think we talked about this with Nick, who's the head of data and analytics in Ipsos. He mentioned like 5 different approaches. You maybe have a recollection of that?
I don't remember the exact name of the model, but I know that he applied different types of model to find the best solution. And I think the main thing to know about the prediction model is that we use the back data to actually enrich the segments. And based on that, we see, okay, first of all, we looked at all the segments, looked at all the back data and see what is most predictive to find these segments. And then we decided to activate some of these more behavioral, more hard data elements to make sure that we can build a prediction model that has a high accuracy. But the exact name of the model, I cannot tell. I can send you to our data science person and he can probably talk for hours about it.
Yes, he would want to do that, absolutely. Now I think that for us, it was a really interesting journey to commence on together with Vodafone. and to really explore how we can bridge the different worlds of human insights and data insights. And what we actually found is that you need both, right? So if you talk to a data scientist, you will get a really precise answer on how you can predict behavior using all kinds of data sources, big data sources, smaller data sources that are out there. But it's more data that can help you optimize sometimes things that you do. Whereas if you probe the human part, so the motivational part in this case, and the attitudinal part and the behavioral part, so that you really try to understand the why, you need a smaller set of data, but it can have a much more tactical or strategic impact on the whole marketing strategy that you have. And by bringing these two together, so the human and the data part, in the fashion that we did with Vodafone, we actually hope that it's going to be exemplary for other use cases that we do know are out there. And I hope that we can find some more. So if any of you have further challenges for us, we're open to take those. If you have any other questions, I'm not sure. I think that we reached the final question in the chat window. It's silent now. So I think that for us, this was it. Maybe I'll skip to the last slide, which is a slide to thank you for your time and your attention.
Patricia, thank you very much. For me, as a Vodafone Ziggo customer, actually, was very interesting to see how it works on the other side, so to say. And also, I think I recently experienced some of your new stuff that you came up with and implemented. And I must say, I'm a very happy customer. And I'm no tech-savvy person for sure. I wrote down that I'm probably a deal seeker. So that was very interesting to see. So please pass that on to Vodafone Ziggo. That's it's working. All the work that you did. Yeah. Well, to all of the viewers, thank you so much for viewing this webinar. For future webinars, I would like to say please follow us for the Visser van Baars Big Data Network on the Meetup to stay informed of all the new webinars that we're hosting. And I would like to say thank you very much for listening and viewing, and I hope to see you next time, and have a great day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Nou, ik denk dat hij nog steeds wordt opgenomen, dus ik ga hieruit, Tris.
Oké. Doei.
Hoi. Nou, nu is hij gestopt. Goed, dan kunnen we nog wel even blijven misschien. Ik werd gestopt.